to Goldie Lapiner, who Goldie Tanzer was the great Rabbi Tanzer's daughter, passed away yesterday. My sister studied law with her, and she a lovely person, and she actually introduced Clive Engelberg to his wife. I don't know if you know that, Dan. She made the shidduch for Clive Engelberg.
Oh, wow.
And but such a always someone positive and accomplished, as is the whole family. They're all accomplished people. So I mean, they just had their loss recently of their dad. So I mean, they should only have comfort and simchas and no more sorrow.
Amen.
So I've chosen something that's applicable to us, what we may have done in the past, and anyway. So it says here, it's a negative commandment to strike no person, whatever, injury. The admonition on this derives from the verse, 40 lashes he may give him, he may not add more. And that's in Devarim. That's for certain punishments. For this is an injunction to strike no man, whatever injury, no Jew. It is a kal v'chomer by reasoning from the less to the more. When someone has become punishable by whiplashes, so the Torah has given permission to strike him, Scripture commands to add nothing to the flogging when he is beaten. How much more certainty must this apply to other human beings? If someone strikes his fellow man a blow entailing damages of less than a pruta, which is the smallest value coin, he should receive whiplashes. But if the damages amount to more than a pruta, for what must he become obligated to make payment of a pruta or more? Since he became duty bound to pay money, he receives no whiplashes. He received no whiplashes, but he does not violate the prohibition. Even if a person only raises his hand against his fellow man, he is called a rasha.
Wow.
However, if someone delivers a blow in the course of discipline and education, he commits no transgression. Because that's going back to what we were talking about in Lashon Hara, that's for constructive purpose. It's not ideal, not in our politically correct society today. It's avoided. Okay, then we continue on this theme. It's a negative commandment to strike one's father or mother. Okay, that comes from Shmot. The admonition derives from the verse, he may not add more, which is in the previous one. If a person afflicted a wound on his father or his mother, and they were witnesses and a prior warning, his execution should be by strangulation.
Wow.
If he struck his father on the ear and deafened him, he would deserve death, since it is impossible that a drop of blood was not shed within. If he struck him without inflicting a wound, he is punishable as for striking any other Jew. If someone struck his father or his mother after their death, he is free of penalty. It is forbidden to do bloodletting for reasons of health on one's own father or mother, and so of course surgery. That's if a son happens to be a daughter happens to be a surgeon. If there is no other physician there, he is to do as they order him. This applies in every place and every time. Okay, so one can't hit one's parents. But I'm just going back here. It said, without inflicting a wound, he's punishable like as if a normal Jew is. You can't strike any Jew. It says so. Okay. Can I continue here? Okay, I think it goes on to cursing. I think we've done that. We can do that tomorrow. Because you can't, well, basically we have to try avoid not hitting people, but if it's for self-defense, I'm sure there are leniencies, surely. You're allowed to protect yourself.
Also, if a Jew is an apikosos,
how are we to determine that?
I don't know.
You see,
if he's very vocal, maybe you can shut him up.
But are we allowed to take action against him?
No, I don't think so. But I'm just asking. No, I don't
It's
know.
a
We'll
good
have to look
question.
into it. I'm not sure. Suppose if they get violent, then you can, because they could.
Yeah, of course, sure. You can protect yourself, defend
and
yourself.
And they can call the mob the Jewish squad, the Apikoros squad.
Yeah.
It's American politics humor. All right, let's continue, guys.
Okay.
Damon's not amused. Arthur's trying
Damon's
to
not
smile.
Impressed. Arthur's semi-impressed. And Steve is quarterly impressed.
There we go. All right, guys. Can we start the new link? And then, are you done, Kevin? I think you are. Right?
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Damon?
Nothing. All right.
In the day, I don't think we should try avoid clapping people or getting aggro or confrontational.
Yeah.
Unless it's to defend ourselves, and we.
Okay.
Okay. And also to defend the honor of Hashem, eh? So to defend yourself and the honor of Hashem would be my guess.
If we know what can do, if we have enough knowledge, that's
yeah. Yes. No. Presuming you've got enough knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm recording.
All right. So we looked at the upper ox and the lower ox. Okay. So now we're hitting a new case to try and see if we have another proof for Rav Nachman versus Rav Yehuda. On certain issues they agree, on certain issues they disagree. We can see that the Gemara was stringent, much more stringent than Rav Yehuda and Rav Nachman. Why was it more stringent? Well, very simply, it said that at the end of the day, that you do have to be conscious, even with the tam ox, if you are sustaining some sort of a loss. And because you are have to have the presence of mind, you would have to pay if you pushed over the upper ox rather than pulling out your lower ox, because the level of exertion was the same. Both Rav Yehuda and Rav Nachman don't agree. Their view is that if you're going to sustain a loss and that you might not have the presence of mind, you don't have to go through the least exerted effort, it would seem. Maybe it's not the case. I'll check with maybe the Rashi or the Tosfot and see if there's some sort of difference. But it would seem that the Gemara is more stringent in this particular case. And I think it's more stringent just because the level of exertion is exactly the same. Now we're going to have a case that seems to contradict this because it's looking for a proof. And it's looking for a proof in trying to determine why you can take such extreme action for yourself when the other person clearly has a loss, when you've got a more effective way of doing it without damaging the other person's vessel so much. So the Gemara makes another attempt to decide the issue. Come learn a proof from the following Baraisa. If one fills the courtyard of his fellow with barrels of wine or barrels of oil, the owner of the courtyard may break them and exit. He may break them and he may enter. Okay, so there what we're doing is we're talking about somebody has a private domain and there's a courtyard, they're sharing a common courtyard. So I think you can use this as an example of maybe a townhouse where there's a common area where somebody puts a whole lot of barrels in the parking lot that affects your car. In other words, it's not the public domain, but they've blocked your ability to get in and out of your apartment, or maybe put it by the door in the walkway. So, for example, in many of the apartments in South Africa and Israel, there is a common, what do you call it? There's a common passage where you get to the various apartments. So if that common passage was blocked, you're entitled to break the barrels upon exiting and upon entering. So this seems a little bit extreme. Why does it seem extreme? Because if you take a look, what is your alternative, guys? What do you think your alternative could be?
To move the barrels out the way.
Exactly.
Just move it out of the way. Don't destroy it. If you can avoid it. It's like your example you gave us, rather shoot in the leg than shoot in the chest.
Correct. So why does it go through?
So you want to minimize the damage, period. Sorry, that's it.
No, that's perfect. So why does it go through such effort in the previous one to hold the person accountable to pay when they pushed the other ox over, when in fact, instead of pulling the other ox out. In other words, they clearly did the more extreme case. They pushed the other ox, the attacking ox that was on top, and they pushed that person off, that ox off, and it died as a result. So then the person that's done that is liable to pay for the offending damage they've done, even though the ox was attacked. So why in the previous case do you think that we're more stringent than in this case?
Because here you're dealing with life, and the other one's a barrel of oil.
Okay, that's a good point. But it's not a human life, it's an animal life. But
Okay.
that is a good point. And then what would the implication be?
And the other one is the one's being attacked. The other one's actually in your passageway, which is your property.
Okay, but you're proving the opposite now.
Oh, okay.
Kev,
So-
what-
Damon, so maybe you can
Yeah.
say, well, the ox is someone, the ox is used for their livelihood, and it's a serious, more serious issue. I mean, they own that ox, and it generates income for them. So maybe the reason.
is a valid reason. Arthur's one is the opposite. Let me tell you, mate. Just repeat your question. There's a reason for saying this, right?
You're talking about the previous one is when the ox is being attacked, right? And you pushed him off. Okay. And the other one is where the barrel's on your private walkway. Okay, your private walkway. It's not just it's on your property.
Said something earlier on. Yeah, you're just repeating it. What did you say earlier on? I forgot.
I forgot.
All right. So what I'm saying is here, you were talking about the animal's life.
Oh, that.
And
Yeah, okay.
I was saying, so firstly, you're not dealing with a human life. And then you asked a question. What question did you ask? You were trying to prove why it's more stringent that you have to pay for throwing off the offending ox on top. Why?
Because
you-
okay, go, Gav.
Arthur, go ahead.
Because you.
No, you go for it. Go for it.
Okay, because you're not sure if at that time whether the ox is tamamud. When you're pushing it off, that's
so
one
we're
reason.
saying, so take the case of a muad ox. We're saying that you still are liable to pay if you push over the muad ox.
Oh,
so you're going to
because-
get full payment.
Okay, but so then the other thing is, it's instead of pulling over the ox, I got my cat here. You actually can pull your ox out.
Yes, but here you can remove the barrels gently instead of smashing them.
Okay.
So what's your question, Damon? Sorry, sorry,
that's-
I've got these guys. I've got these guys sawing at the back here. They're cutting down this massive tree. They've been here for a few days. It's so noisy. Just repeat your question, because I also want to try help you out, because I'm sure I can.
Okay, hang on, Kevin.
Just the question, Damon, not the content.
All right. The question for all of you, and then Kevin wanted to answer, is that you've got two cases. In the first case, we seem to penalize the person on top when the muad ox is attacking your ox, and you're going to get full compensation, and then you're not going to sustain the loss. If you pull out your ox from the danger underneath because you're in a bit of a panic, you're fine. If you push over the ox on top, when in fact you're not going to suffer loss, but you're going to get full compensation, according to Rav Yehuda, you've got a problem, because there you wouldn't sustain a loss, so you're not allowed to take action for yourself. And according to the Gemara, even when we're talking about a more that you should have had the presence of mind to pull out your ox instead of endangering the ox on the top by pushing it over. So in that case, even the Gemara is more stringent than Rav Yehuda. Rav Nachman said you can you can take force either way. As far as I'm concerned, I think it would also state that there would be a liability even from Rav Nachman if you have to push the ox on top, because clearly that's a certain level of excessive force, it's deemed. Why, when you can move the barrels out of the way, is it not deemed that smashing the barrels is considered excessive force?
Because you are allowed to smash the barrels if you're going to sustain a loss. So if you're on your way to work and you got a massive meeting, you could smash it to smithereens.
But why can't you just move them out of the way and cause the least amount of force?
Because maybe it's a lot
Maybe
of
you're
exertion.
not able to. Maybe you're not able to move it out of the way. Maybe it's wedged in and it can't be moved.
Okay, so all right, look, that seems like a reasonable, plausible answer. The Gemara gives a separate answer. I was testing how much Chazorah you guys have done. Not that much.
Yes, no, you're correct there.
Okay, so that's what I'm testing. Kev, you wanted to say something?
Oh, you said it. You were saying rather remove your ox from the bottom if you can.
Yeah.
To avoid that.
So here, exactly.
Can I just add something, Damon? Just 1 second. If you had a park, I'm just giving an example. If you had a park and you got your dog and there's another bigger dog, you got a dachshund and there's an Alsatian and he goes for your dog, you're going to try pull off that Alsatian. You're not going to try get your little dog out of there. I'm just saying.
Okay, so you would be in good company. You see, we're mixing a bit emotional with your working animal. So people didn't have the same relationships then with how we have our relationship with our animals now. We don't have working animals. We've got animals that you treat like children. They're part of the family. So if somebody was attacking one of your kids, you would defend yourself in that way. People in those times had a very different relationship with animals. Where did we learn this? We learned this when an animal went into your private domain and you could clap somebody else's animal to give it a bit of chinuch to realize it shouldn't come back in your store and eat vegetables. You remember that?
Yeah,
so they treat animals as like we treat buckies or a car. They had a purpose. They had a purpose to work. So they discussed yesterday in the Gemara in 93a, what happens in the case where your animal you've already trained it to respond to commands, and therefore to teach another animal is going to take a lot of time and effort. That's seen as a sustainable loss. So in that particular case, you still then, if it was the Muad ox, wouldn't be able to have any sort of claim because you're getting back full money. So what about the value of the time that you used to train this ox to respond to commands? So that hasn't got a tangible or quantifiable amount that the Beis Din can repay you for. It's a non-quantifiable amount, so it's not counted as part of the calculation. That's number one. So if it's a Muad ox and you're getting your full money back, you've got no reason to take more extreme action, and that's the first case. And yet we find if we push over the top ox, even in that case, you have to compensate because you're not thinking in terms of a loss. Even if you take a case of a tam and you push over the top ox, the Gemara says you're responsible, but not if you pull down your ox from below. The reason being is one's considered extreme force and is liable to injure the animal on the top, whereas pulling your animal down through it will basically separate the two animals. And in that particular case, it's the same level of exertion. So what Tosfot goes through here, and it's in your notes, is that the reason in the case of the barrels that you can smash them is not only what Gavin said, which was a good point, that maybe they're too heavy to move, but in a case where it takes a lot of time. And therefore, that sort of time that it takes, you're not meant to go through a lot of physical and time-wasting exertion in order to move over those obstructions in those barrels. What you can do is, if it's the same amount of effort to pull your animal out as to push another animal over, then you're held responsible because it's the same level of exertion and time. The minute there's a huge amount of time when somebody's inconvenienced you, that you've got to repack their goods and move it out of the way, you have no obligation to do so because they weren't courteous to you and they put it in your way, and now you can have any right to leave and remove it without any cost if you spend it. So Kevin had a question. Yeah,
I want to ask you something. It's actually an example. The other day, a couple of weeks ago, I was walking and there was a guy riding this electric scooter on the pavement, and he just missed this old man and his wife. The old man pushed the oak, he nearly fell off. Now, would this type of thing apply? Had he injured the guy seriously, the guy that was riding the cork elect, even though the guy was in the wrong? Is this a similar type of Could you apply these principles?
Yeah, you know what? I actually wouldn't know how to apply it. I don't blame the old guy, because those vehicles, when I was in Renala, one or two of them nearly smashed me to pieces, because they've got no courtesy for pedestrians, but doesn't give a pedestrian a right to injure somebody in return. I can guarantee you one thing, Kevin: this young guy's not going to do that in a hurry again.
Yeah. But
It's
if he had injured him, then what? Is the pedestrian responsible?
I think he
like
would
you're saying,
because you're entitled to ride your electric bike in that particular domain. But I don't understand why you're allowed to do that in Israel. In Holland, you're not allowed to do that. There's a line in Belgium. There's a line specifically for bikes, and there's a separate line for pedestrians that are walking, because pedestrians walk at a slower pace and they don't look behind them when they walk. So you can't have two different paces of traffic within the pedestrian walkway. You've got one for bikes when my brother was in France, and you've got a separate one completely for pedestrians. I've never understood that.
But if he injures him badly,
Australia's also got that.
Even though the guy was in the wrong, the pedestrian pushed him. But if the guy got badly injured, it's like I'm comparing it to, even though the guy pushed the moored ox that was on top, and he pushed him away, and the guy and the died, he's liable.
You're correct. You're absolutely correct, because legally it would deem that he had right of way to ride there. Secondly, it wasn't in self-defense that he pushed the guy out the way. In temper, after the guy went past, then injured him. He wouldn't. He'd be liable. He'd obviously be liable. So you're correct. I've also got bashing in the background. All right. So let's just go on with the Gemara, and it basically says he may break and enter. This proves that one may enforce the law for himself. The Gemara refutes this proof. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, perhaps when the Baraisa said that he may break barrels and exit, it means that he may do so in order to go to court. And when it says that he may break barrels and enter, it means that he may do so in order to be able to bring his proofs of ownership to court. Do you want me to repeat that? Because I had background noise.
I've got background noise. Please repeat it. I'm battling quite a bit with the background noise. Okay. Repeat that, please.
Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, perhaps when the Baraisa said he may break the barrels to enter and exit, it means that he must do so in order to go to court. And when it says that he may break the barrels and enter, it means that he must do so in order to bring his proofs of ownership to court. So this is what it means. It means that he can't be stuck in his apartment or his townhouse. So if he's stuck there and he's going to run out of food, or he needs to take the case to court, it's only for a very good reason that he may smash the barrels in order to exit. Or he's got work and he'd get fired if he didn't arrive at work, etc. You can't just smash the barrels for no reason. That was the refutation. And this is not the original Rav Nachman. This is Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. It's a different person, because the actual Rav Nachman would say there's no problem to smash the barrels, specifically because the person would sustain a loss here. But even if he wouldn't, the person had no right to put the barrels in your way. So this is a different Rav Nachman. And he said, what are you talking about? Because when you're entering your premises, why would you need to smash the barrels? There's no urgency to get into your place. There's an urgency. Say, Kevin, you've got a kibbutz. Say you've got a meeting and you have to be a mashkiach and you have to go urgently. And you open up your front door and there's a whole lot of trash or whatever the case may be, and you have to get it out of the way in a hurry in order to leave. That's one thing. But he was saying, why would you have to enter your place in a hurry on the other way around? So he says, then you'd have to bring proofs of ownership to court. So in those days, people would leave their documents in their house. So in order to prove the legal case of this person going against you, you have to prove that the property is yours. Because when it comes to court, he would say that that part of the courtyard is his, and that's why he dumped the stuff there, and you owe him for breaking barrels of wine or barrels of oil, and you would have to legally prove that that courtyard was yours, or at the very least that you had dual use.
Yes.
So it says bring his proofs of ownership to court, because the court papers and the deeds were always stored in somebody's house in general, because that you would need them at any time to access if there was a legal dispute. All right. So there we've got no clarity whatsoever. Why? Because we're trying to find out who is right here. We're trying to find out, Kevin, if Rav Nachman is right, or we're trying to find out if Rav Yehuda is right. So does this proof bring a clarity either way?
Okay, so just going back one step, you said person has to have proof that he has a right to use the Reshut HaRabim, or the public area. Are you talking about the guy that has been affected by the blockage of the barrels, or just both parties?
Okay, so every case that we've had here, the first case that we had is a... Okay, so guys, what we're trying to do is we're using every case to try and prove who's right. Are you allowed to take the law into your own hands, or are you not? It started off with the case of the well. And Rav Nachman said you may smash his teeth 1,000 times. Meaning that if you're going to lose money, Rav Nachman said there's nothing to talk about. Even Rav Yehuda says you are entitled to, if there's no other way to do it, enforce the law for yourself. But it has to be the last resort. Rav Nachman seems a bit more gung-ho, that even if there's no loss sustained, that you are entitled to enforce the law for yourself. What was the proof of this? If somebody has your article, now that article is not like water in a well that's going to be used up, where you're dealing with your animals and your crops dying and everything else. You're dealing with the person that's merely holding on to your article, where if you trouble the court, he would have to give it back, and therefore there's no loss sustained in the interim. In that case, Rav Nachman said you're entitled to take it back, because there was Ben Bugbug, he used that particular proof that you can go and take it back. Then we don't have any clarity, because he turned around, and then there was Rav Yanai who turned around and said, no, it was this term to basically get the courts to act in your behalf and smashed his teeth, meaning take away his power. But we're saying the wording of the pronouns was incorrect there, because it used it in the first person instead of the third person, so we had no clarity. Then we brought this other case with the ox, and again we've got no clarity, because it's not specific in terms of muad or tam. That's the one issue. And further to which, apart from the no clarity, we can see that if it is a tam, you are entitled to pull your other ox out, even if the top ox dies. So that doesn't prove Rav Nachman versus Rav Yehuda. Do you get what I'm saying? On the points that they agree, there's nothing to prove. What are we trying to prove here with all of these examples? And this last one with the barrels, what are we actually trying to prove? I want to test who's done Chazorah.
We're trying to prove either that Rav Nachman is right, where he says either way, whether sustain a loss or don't sustain a loss, or we're trying to also maybe prove with Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda, whether it's only if you're going to sustain a loss.
Excellent. That's the bottom line, guys. If it's only to prevent a loss, not sustain. Everybody's using the word sustain.
Prevent a loss, sorry. Prevent a loss.
Prevent a loss. If you can only enforce the law yourself in order to prevent a loss, this proves that there's a parameter on how you can collect for yourself on behalf of the court. And that means that only if you're going to sustain a loss, and therefore Rav Yehuda is right, and there's a constraint. If there is no such thing as having that limitation of sustaining a loss, and you can take the law into your own hands, that would prove Rav Nachman. Does that make sense? So far we haven't proved it. Why haven't we proved it in this particular case? Because we're saying that there is a loss that could be sustained, possibly. What is the loss of the barrel? Well, if you can't get in your place and you can't get the deed, you're not going to be able to win the court case to prove that that courtyard is yours. Therefore, you need to enter your place. In terms of exiting, you could sustain a loss because if you can't leave your place and prevent a loss. Thank you. If you can't leave your place, then what that actually means is that you could end up getting fired, or you could end up losing a very, very big client, or you could die of starvation or malnutrition because you can't get to the shops. So to be boxed into your place is sustaining a loss. To not be allowed into your place, prevent a loss. Gavin, why did you start that?
I know, Gavin, it's you.
Gavin, you started yesterday.
Yeah, no, we can say that we're preventing you. Keep saying sustain. Okay,
Gavin is very influential.
Well, he's the Kohanim.
I don't know about that.
I just want to say something here, Damon.
Yeah.
My point over here is just to make aware. I think that it all depends on who is really taking the action and whether the guy was trying to protect himself versus whether the guy was actually trying to damage.
I agree with you. I agree that Kibber's actually brought up a good point. How do you know? This is a very, very difficult thing to prove. So I thought about what you said because it's a good point. When somebody smashes your barrels, you don't know if they've just got exactly. Kevin brought this example. Kevin, that example where that old man, the guy whizzed past it, right? And in temper, he almost knocked him over. Sometimes I would see people smashing the barrels because their exit was blocked. And they're not doing it because they have a meeting, but they're doing it out of temper for being inconvenienced. So I think
sorry. But then there's a problem because he's done it out of temper when he should have tried to hold himself back.
I agree with you, but you know who's going to...
Damon, can I give you another example?
I just need to answer Kibber's
after that, it happened to me actually. I'll give you another example.
When you use the term groma, indirect murder, you can't be put to death by the Sanhedrin on earth, but Hashem is going to hold you responsible under the hands of heaven. We did this with Schottenstein many times, and I remember Ian and Gavin were writing this book of how you could get off for murder, and Simcha turned around and said, they were saying it half tongue-in-cheek, but the reality is you don't get away with anything. So Hashem knows a person's intention, and it's very difficult to prove because they didn't have photographs in those days where you could see the guy with glee smashing the barrels, and he was unemployed, where he wasn't running to a meeting where he'd sustain the loss or anything major, or he worked for himself from home, and he had to get out urgently when in the middle of the workday, when he generally was 300 pounds and stocked up with enough food that he could eat off his own body fat for a week. So I agree, but Hashem knows. Hashem knows. So yeah, that's the case. Kev, you were going to use an example.
Yes, I should have actually given this example. I must give you, about 2 months ago, I went for a run near the big park, Lumi, the national park, and the Maccabi headquarters. And I'm crossing the zebra crossing, and this oak and a motorbike just almost whacked me, missed me by a centimeter. So he stopped on the side of the road, and I went up to him and I said, Paul Beseda, what? I said, what? If I would have clapped the oak or kicked his bike and damaged it, I would have been liable for damages. What would it have achieved? He didn't hit me. He missed me. He could have hit me, but he didn't, even though it was by just over a centimeter.
I agree with you completely.
So, I mean, I'm saying it's related. What's it going to achieve by damaging someone else's property? You've damaged it, then I would be liable. Can't get away with it.
Well,
as you said,
I did something similar that on my bike by accident. I didn't knock somebody, but I managed to get out the way in time. The guy wanted to come for me, and I just apologized. I said, look, secondly, I had my chain in my hand, so I don't think he would have come for me, my bike chain. But I apologized. I said, look, he says, do you want to fight? I said, no. I said, it wasn't, I didn't actually hit you. I missed you, but he wanted to come for me.
But you know what? I see this very often in Israel, and I really think they should have a separate lane for, because I've nearly been hit, and you've nearly hit, and now on the receiving end, somebody wanting to hit him because they just the adrenaline is rushing. Arthur, it's a disaster. I don't understand.
They are trying to put it in, but a lot of roads don't, because the roads are very small here. Okay.
It depends on the area.
Yeah, it depends on the area. Like in Renana, we have a bike lane, but the bike lane goes for like 2 streets, and then there's no bike lane anymore. Okay.
Tel Aviv, there's plenty.
But what does piss me off is that when I'm riding in a bike lane, you get people walking in your bike lane.
Yeah.
That pisses me off because now, you can see it's clearly 2 bikes. You've got another pavement on the other side. Just step 3 meters to the left. You won't have to bing behind you. They still walk. Even in Renana, they're walking your bike lane. Like you sit there, you have to swerve out their way to go around.
When Ilan went to France and Belgium and Holland, it's completely separate. The pedestrians can't move over.
But let me explain to you. The amount of bikes that are in Holland before they built the roads was huge. In Israel, the electric bike has only become very popular in the last couple of years. I mean, in Holland, they ride bikes all the time. It's like their national pastime.
That's not an excuse for the law not to catch up.
No, but let me put it this way. Have you've seen the size of Israel on the streets, right? If they had to put a bike lane in some of these pavements, there wouldn't be people be able to go to the shops because it'll take over the road, or it'll take over. Most of the time, I ride in the road because it's just easier. Nadine doesn't like it.
So why aren't they allowed in the road like in South Africa?
Technically, electric bikes have to be in the road. That's actually Israeli law. Okay, but you get away with it because they're supposed to put a lot of the times when you're traveling in, I mean, I've been on some of these roads, but I'm more nervous to be on the road than the pavement. You got these big trucks coming up behind you, and you're trying to keep to the road, and it's quite nerve wracking for a bike that only goes 25 k's, and everybody's doing 75.
That's true.
If my bike was going 75 k's and I was keeping up with the traffic, I wouldn't have a problem.
All right, guys, listen. Tomorrow I want to cover a little bit more ground because we're going to talk about a Nitzach.
Okay.
Nitzach, which is a slave that wanted to stay on with his master after the 7-year period,
and
where he stays on until the Jubilee year. And
it's in this week's parsha, actually, Mishpatim. It's covered in this week's parsha, by the way, Dan.
Akiva knows brilliant laying it.
No, Akiva is the guy that would know that. He's the king.
I was going to say, Kevin, you brought up something more than I did over here. I'd never had that in my mind.
James?
You've done it. You've said it more than we have.
Yeah, I've said it.
Rabbi Cohen said the funniest thing. He says, "Don't throw him out the window when you can throw him down the stairs."
Yeah, I remember that.
He's a funny.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And listen, we're going to go at a bit of a faster pace.
Okay.
What I wanted to check today is how you guys did Chazorah. And only Arthur.
Yeah, that's right. Arthur did. Yeah.
So it's fine. We'll go at a quicker pace. And I'm just going to test you if there's only a question that comes up. Because if nobody did Chazorah, there's no point in testing you guys. If you didn't do it, you didn't do it. And I understand you're busy. I really do understand you're busy.
No, we should try. We should actually. You're right.
No, but we're trying to get there. I'm trying to get there as well. I'm just under pressure, but I am trying to get there. So I should be there shortly. It is my aim.
Look, I find the audio help. I played while I'm doing stuff, and then I get at least to absorb something.
All right, so guys, listen, Akiva, the whole reason we're doing this just before it knocks off is to try and see if the guys get the essence of what all these cases are trying to prove. So we don't have to spend more time on it. You've got the concept.